Yo, what is going on, guys? Hope it's on a fantastic day. Want to go over some news for the Philadelphia Eagles. A few things I definitely want to go over. We heard some, there was a podcast that had Terrell Edmunds on it, which was very interesting. I kind of took a look at that. And there were some things that were kind of interesting from that. I want to go over the running backs really quick. And there was really circulating the past probably 3-4 weeks, and then this isn't anything concrete or anything, but some reports on the running back situation and maybe a potential guy that we think that's going to be in the rotation this year that might not be in the rotation. So a few things I definitely want to go over with all of that and all the great stuff. So let's get straight into the news.
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
Yo, what is going on, guys? What's on a fantastic day? I hope everyone's is going to be enjoying their weekend this weekend, and another week almost gone, closer to training camp and still waiting on that. But while we wait, this is the time where players are really off right now, that are doing their own thing, and you'll see interviews, you'll see different things, and kind of get a perspective of where this roster is, and maybe see some, maybe hear some certain podcasts from players around, behind the scenes of what's going on with the Eagles. Maybe we find something that's going on. And Terrell Edmunds was interesting, and I really respect him, and I really like him even more now. Kind of hear his journey from the Steelers coming to the Eagles, what it kind of meant to him, all that great stuff. Obviously, talked about his family, talked about having his brothers Terrell, with Trey Edmunds and Tremaine Edmunds, and some and his mother was a track star. He's comes from a football family pretty much, which is pretty cool. He was on the podcast, I think it was called the Second Win podcast, or just Second Win, the YouTube channel. Okay. Now signing with the Eagles was an interesting one, and he was in he was with the Steelers for 4 to 5 years, 5 years I think, and he was ready to get a multi-year deal going. That was the rumor, from a while ago, that he was ready to really take a multi-year extension, and then the Eagles kind of swooped in and called his agent, and he did not hesitate on taking a 1-year deal coming to Philadelphia. I mean, really didn't. And he was more of the plan B option coming to Philly, which was, the Eagles, Howie Roseman, he always has that plan B. And when Chauncey didn't sign, Terrell Edmunds was really the guy, like the first signing at safety, really straight from the beginning. But talked about obviously signing with the Eagles, and, being, it's a night and day experience. It's new players. He wants to fit in really well. The team was just in the Super Bowl. Really just kind of proving himself. He really talked about proving himself a whole lot, kind of adjusting to the new scenery of the Philadelphia Eagles, and that they have something in place. There's a lot of players that came back. This defense, there's a lot of players that are still here that were here last year. And we lost a few free agents, obviously, but Howie Roseman has done a fantastic job this offseason. Kind of talked about all that and kind of fitting in, and, wanting to, kind of put his stamp in Philadelphia and do a really good job for the team this year, which I totally respect. I think the biggest thing that he talked about was really handling himself as really, his expectations of himself, because he was a first round pick, and as, he doesn't look ahead. He doesn't look towards the future. He looked towards, what he does every single day. As long as he takes a couple steps forward every day and gets better every day, it's all that matters. So he's not the type of guy that kind of looks down the lane, into the future of goals. Once you start kind of doing that, you kind of, you're putting too much pressure on yourself. You got to take everything day by day. And I really did like that. I thought that was pretty good, pretty cool. So, being worthy of being that first round pick. Obviously, we know Terrell Edmunds, has got some flaws. I think he's a good stopgap player, but he's not really the most fantastic tackler. I think when it comes to his ball hawk ability, I think he had 5 picks in 5 years. I mean, I think he could do a lot more than that in 1 year. I honestly think if the corners are played well and Sean Desai does a good job with these corners, I feel like Terrell Edmunds will be a pretty big ball hawk for us. Even with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, there are times where he tackled really good, and there were times where he couldn't tackle at all. I mean, kind of like the same thing in some aspects. I think Chauncey was a little bit better, obviously, but Terrell Edmunds will be a very interesting player. I think he will just do enough. And like I said, the safety position going to training camp is going to have a lot of competition going forward. So really cool looking at that. So the next thing was a really juicy one. Talked about the Eagles locker room. There has been talks between the players, like what's being said, like what film are they getting, shown, when they're, during like, OTAs or when they have meetings and stuff. So Terrell Edmunds did say like there's always little talks of the Super Bowl last year. Not that much, but there's always like the little talks and what they could have done and how they could have, maybe done things more different. Obviously, we know as fans what went wrong outside of the game and inside of the game. But he kind of went through like there are little talks about the Super Bowl and how the Eagles kind of had to have a big chip on their shoulder. He wouldn't say what players discussed this, but he did say that, they got a little chip on their shoulder right now. They're kind of pissed off of what happened last year. And obviously with, a much harder schedule this year and, having one of the toughest schedules now to being one of the easiest schedules last year to now one of the toughest schedules is definitely something else is definitely going to be something that's not concerning, but, is really going to show where this team is at, especially, with these coordinators this year since the Eagles have 2 brand new coordinators. Terrell Edmunds pretty much said, from what I hear in the locker room and what the guys are saying, they know what they're after this year. There is concentration, full concentration on getting back to the Super Bowl this year. Okay, so that little bit of, talking about the Super Bowl last year, it's motivation, and I think that's a really cool thing, so that was pretty cool. And the last thing that he talked about was obviously between Ben Roethlisberger and Jalenhurts. He talked about both quarterbacks. We won't talk about Ben. Obviously, much respect for him, through his career. But talked about, Jalenhurts, his chemistry with the wide receivers, which is kind of crazy. And he kind of said, he's got a lot of trust with the receiver core. And we know that, you got to have trust between your quarterback and your receivers. And I know he plays defense, but because he plays against Jalenhurts at practice, it's nice to hear the other side of things on the defensive side of the ball when he's facing him. Hurts steering safeties with his eyes, luring safeties into a certain spot. And then really at a cut of a dime, Jalenhurts could switch his eye position and throw a perfect ball to a receiver and get 20-25 yards easily, so, and he even said he's been tricked on some of those plays from Jalenhurts, but he said he commands the offense. People look up to him, people listen to him, people are standing upright for him. So that's really cool to really hear that. We kind of already know this, but it's nice to hear that from at least the defensive side of the ball and Terrell Edmunds to tell us this. But really it's trust and commanding your offense. And like I said, the trust in the receivers and gravitating those players towards you and they want to play for you. And that was a really cool thing. From the podcast. I thought it was really cool. So we got a little bit of a, behind the scenes in the locker room, what's being talked about, what's giving them that chip on their shoulder this year. And really another part of it is, Jalenhurts is the big piece to your whole entire team, your quarterback. That's what's most important, to have even a better year this year. So it was really nice to, to hear all that from this podcast that Terrell Edmunds had. And I really liked the way he talked about his family, talked about obviously going from the Steelers to the Eagles, and kind of wants to imprint himself in Philadelphia, and I got to respect that. Now, is Terrell Edmunds going to be a guy that will re-sign? Will he be re-signed in another year? Will he get a multi-year extension? If he plays really well, you never know. This could be like another Chauncey moment where the guy just explodes on field. You know what I mean? You never know. You know what I mean? But going into training camp, there is a lot of competition at safety, adding a lot of players here. We've talked about it a million times, Reed, Blankenship. You had Sidney Brown from the draft. That was a Red Star recruit for the Eagles. You know what I mean? So there's a lot going on at safety. Obviously a question mark still, but, due time with full pads, joint practices, and, getting to those preseason games, we'll kind of find out how this whole thing is molding together. So that's a really cool thing. I really enjoyed, that whole segment of the podcast. So that was pretty cool. Definitely check that out if you guys haven't. You'll find it easily. Now, I want to talk about, obviously, the running back situation. Now, the past like 3 weeks, I've heard of really a lot of reports, and they're not concrete. This is like third party. This is really nothing. Okay. There's been like, PFF and a few other sites that have said that Trey Sermon might make this roster, that there's, consideration where maybe Rashad Penny is not going to work out. And yeah, it sounds crazy, but we all have to remember that Rashad Penny has a very big injury history. He only played 5 games last year. You know what I mean? Like the whole reason to sign Swift and to sign Rashad Penny is obviously if you can keep both of those guys healthy, man. I'm excited to see like how Brian Johnson's going to use these running backs in this offense and the amount of pressure it's going to be taken off Hurts with a better running back core by a mile than last year. You have some different skill sets back there. You know what I mean? You have some really good skill sets back there. And I wouldn't mind to see, like, what is Trey Sermon going to do? What is, Kennedy Brooks going to do? Kennedy Brooks is another one that really didn't have a great chance last year. Kennedy Brooks, played at Oklahoma, played with Jalenhurts, run between, he's a north and south runner, runs between the tackles well. But, when we only had 2 preseason games last year, he barely was used, and he had a couple okay runs. He's a bruiser back, so we know he's a heavy hitter. He packs a punch. There's no doubt about it. But more opportunity is where I'm kind of looking at here. As much as I, even remember, even when we had, even at the moment when, it was the end of last year going into this off season, and it was the coaches meetings, the coaches breakfast, brunch, whatever it was. And Nick, went out there and said all these great things about Trey Sermon. And I just saw him make a play on screen, whatever it was. You're like, man, this guy's got a chance to be really good. I wish we can get him more touches. And it just made no sense. Like, you only ran him 2 times last year in that Jags game, in that horrible weathered game, and you never used him again after that. I don't get why they didn't. I don't get it, because realistically, okay, I'm just saying this. In the offseason last year, Trey Sermon was supposed to be traded from the 49ers. Okay, what happened was the Eagles had interest in trading for him. So then he was released off waivers. So he was on the waiver wire, and the Eagles picked him up. So a player that the Eagles wanted to trade for ended up on the waiver wire. Teams, I don't know what position they were in line. There's like a lot, obviously in order from team to team. So each team will pass, and then that team will pick up that player. And the Eagles picked up Trey Sermon. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Really cool. You know what I mean? If they could turn Wendell Small into a pretty good back here, Josh Adams into an okay back here, like they've done pretty good with just, obviously the Eagles have always been good in the trenches, and they put in some running backs that really didn't have like great skill sets, but they worked out pretty well, like Josh Adams and Wendell Smallwood and some of these guys that have worked out in the past. You know what I mean? When it comes to Trey Sermon, like, you ran him 2 times in one game, and then they really didn't use him after that. So that interview, we made a video on that a while ago, and it was just like, I felt like Nick was just saying that, to like, your coach is not going to throw players under the bus. I mean, let's be realistic with that. You know what I mean? So Trey Sermon had 2 pretty good runs. I I want to see more. Like, you know what I mean? I really wanted to see more, and we just Elijah Holyfield was another guy that I was like, he was making guys miss in OTAs and training. Remember Elijah Holyfield? He was another guy that did pretty well, and he just didn't do enough. And I think part of it was, with some of these running backs, if you can't pass protect, you can't pick up those blitzes, it's a big problem. It's you know what I mean? You gotta be able to do that too. So the Eagles have passed on a lot of guys, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that, that one of them would have been a superstar or whatnot. I totally get it. But Trey Sermon, like, if you were going to trade for him, just imagine if you trade for him and gave away a 5th, 6th round pick, or like a 6th, 7th round pick for him. Okay. And, I hate the one thing I can't stand that Howie Roseman does, and it's not a big deal at all. Like, it's really not. Like, I hate giving away draft picks and then not re-signing that player. The Chauncey thing, it just fell through. It was a backloaded contract, so I totally get it. So I don't, you gave 2 picks away for Chauncey, and you couldn't, they tried to re-sign him. They gave it a shot and they couldn't get it done. Obviously, both sides just couldn't work anything out, and it was just, it became a huge mess, and the Eagles had to go into other avenues. The Eagles couldn't wait on Chauncey. They had to make other moves because, how you're on the clock, first day of free agency, second, third, you're on the clock every single day. And Howie just can't wait for one player to make a decision where all the rest of this cap is going to go to. And we had to make other signings. We had to sign Bradbury. We had to bring back Fletcher Cox. You know what I mean? There are other, Slay had got his contract redone. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of stuff going on. So even some of the, I know I get the Trey Sermon question probably every single live stream, every single video, and that's totally normal because I want to see what's going on here with this running back core. Now I feel like they could keep 4 running backs. It could be, it just depends, with Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell included in all of this. But from PFF and some of these other sites the past like a few weeks, there's like people saying that that Penny's not going to work out, that Penny won't even make the team. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I mean, why wouldn't he? Unless he gets hurt. I feel like if Penny gets hurt and he's going to be out, and they just don't feel like, even if he's going to be out a few weeks, just say in training camp he gets hurt, I don't think they'll even hang on to him. I think they'll just let him go. They'll just let him go on an injury settlement, and boom, and they're done. You know what I mean? An injury dispute thing with contracts, and he'll just go on his way. He didn't cost much. He's $600,000 for the year with some incentive, so that's why he was that cheap. So I feel like, yes, if Rashad Penny does get hurt or something happens with him, I think Swift is different. I don't think they'll get rid of Swift if Swift got injured for a few weeks in training camp or something like that. Like I said, knock on wood to all of this, because I don't want to jinx us here. But you always have to talk about it. I think Trey Sermon would be the next runner up, since Nick speaks pretty highly of him, but didn't use him more last year, which I don't get. You know what I mean? I just, why wouldn't you want a heavier back in your rotation? Was he not fast enough? I don't know. I don't know what it was. Was there just not enough guys to, maybe because they had to bring up other guys on special teams for special teams, or maybe keeping Covey? I don't know. I don't know what the issue was, what's so against Trey Sermon as of right now. But, I feel like Trey Sermon will not make the team. I mean, he's always going to be on the reserves, I think. There's a possibility always. And Kennedy Brooks is another one where I feel like he hasn't been giving big opportunity. You know what I mean? When you're on practice squad every year, the past couple of years, you know what I mean? It's really hard to get an opportunity, and when you get it, you really have to flourish, and it really depends on the play that you're on, the situation that you're in preseason. You know what I mean? So it's going to be really tough for guys from practice. It's tough for a practice squad guy to get an active roster spot. It's tough unless you really explode. I mean, it's the toughest thing ever. So those are really the reports I've been seeing on that, like that Penny will not make it out of Eagles training camp because of either he's just not good enough, he lost a step, or he gets injured. You know what I mean? Like I said, I think you're going to have if Penny goes down, you're going to have a competition between Kennedy Brooks and Trey Sermon. We're not in that realm yet of what's going on, but who knows? Rashad Penny, we saw him at his press conference. He looked buff. He was like, we were like, oh man, we're so excited, but if something happens, like, I don't think the Eagles are going to keep him. I don't think the Eagles are going to deal with his injury, and it's just going to keep happening. If it's a calf or it's just something that's lingering nonstop, or like I said, if it's season ending, it's season ending. But if it's lingering like a calf, like a hamstring or a calf, like once that starts happening, you can't nurse a hamstring. You can't nurse a calf. Like you could do stretches, you could massage I don't know what you do for that. You can't do anything. You just got to wait until it feels better. You can't do much for it. So those are kind of the reports that I've been kind of seeing here and there. I don't want it to be true. And yes, I want to see everybody successful, but we can only have so many guys on this roster. Okay. In August, this is the new rule for 2023 now. When the Eagles cut down the roster, remember back in the day, we used to take like 3-4 days to cut down the roster. Now it's down. Well, it was that much a long time ago, but now with this new rule, the Eagles have to cut this roster from 90 to 53 in 1 day. 1 day. I mean, you know how tough that's going to be? Like, it might not be tough. It might be clear cut. It might be very easy. There's good and bad things when it comes to cutting to 90 to 53. Bad because we might let go of somebody that really produced well, and then they really had to make a hard decision, and he might go to another team. And it's good for us because other teams are going to let go of players that might have had good off seasons, might have good preseason games, or showed something. Maybe we pick up a special teams guy, a returner. You know, the waiver wire is ridiculous when teams start to cut. You know what I mean? From 90 to 53 in one day. So that's going to be kind of crazy going down the line. But like I said, this isn't a big deal. I'm not going to, this isn't concrete. There's just things that have been circulating that everyone thinks that Rashad Penny is just not going to make it through Eagles training camp, whether it's health or whether he's just not the same player anymore. And he just takes a step way down. But in my heart, in my soul, I don't think that's the case. I think if Penny, if they distribute the ball well this year, if Penny makes it out, if Swift makes it out without no injuries this offseason, you know, that would be great. Don't expect Penny to be in these preseason games. Don't expect Swift to be in preseason games. Don't expect these stars to play more than one series in these preseason games. That's what you really have to look at going forward. So other than that, that's pretty much it. You know, we talked about, you know, Terrell Edmunds, his little podcast, you know, that he was on, which I thought it was nice to hear some of the background stuff or what was going on in the locker room, which I thought was pretty cool. And obviously the running back situation where, you know, there's opportunity for two more guys here. Like I want to see someone break out a little bit. And I've already talked about past running backs that I thought fit very well, you know, with you know, when your offensive line is built the way it is, you could plug in almost anybody. Now, I'm not saying plug in anybody as in, you know, a low-tier running back with no skill. I mean, he's got to do something, you know what I mean? I think Wendell Small got good overtime. Josh Adams was, you know, Josh Adams just needed to run and just stop stopping and doing his Le'Veon Bell stuff where he just, like, stops and he's too patient at times. You know, I thought he was pretty good, and most of these running backs the Eagles, you know, had that were successful aren't even starting running backs. They're not even backup running backs. They're either special teams or they're not even playing at all or even on practice squad. That's how crazy the Eagles offensive line is. That's where it's been important for a lot of years for this team. So Elijah Holyfield, like I said, another one where, I mean, every time I saw him do something, he was making plays, he was getting yards, he was doing good in OTAs and practice and camp and all that, joint practices, all that great stuff. And, you know, they just never, you know, Trey Sermon had 2 snaps last year and that was it. You know what I mean? I just don't get it sometimes. So it kind of just confuses me a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think about the whole running back situation. Trey Sermon, do you think, you know, is Rashad Penny the player you think he is? I think he is, you know, but like I said, there's a lot of things I have to see, you know, because I can't go off of like a few snaps. I can't go off 2 snaps. I can't go off anything. I got to go off like, you know, I know these guys haven't played a game yet, but, you know, the offseason will kind of show like where they're kind of at. Especially in training camp, joint practice, all that great stuff. So if you lasted this long in this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video as well. Go to Eagles News every single day. We'll be having a stream next week, which should be a lot of fun, and I can't wait for it. And it's going to be pretty cool. So guys, enjoy. I'll see you on the next one. Remember, SHAKESQUAD up, follow us. Peace out, guys. Peace.